Hello, it's Mrs. Rishton reading Phoenix. We're on chapter 24. But before we get to that, I think these turn up backwards on YouTube, these pictures. But anyway, look at that. Can you see him? You'll have to get... All of these are numbered, and this is... I know. And this is number 4. I've got my Roman numerals. And it says the wolf is...
The
wolf is bursting loose.
The Astraeus of the sea. I read this before. The Astraeus of the sea cannot fathom it, for it washes everything away. Or something like that.
It's all a bit spooky dooky. Anyway, when you're back in school, and we can't wait for that, can we? But when you're back in school and you can get this... That's because you're idle.
No.
When you're back in school, you must get this book down off the shelf because
It's good.
It is A, good, and B, fab pictures.
Yeah, they're all good pictures.
Right, chapter 24. The sunflower. The sunfire flew in a great arc to... Do we remember what happened last time?
No, I forgot since you refused to read every night I asked. Which is about 1,000.
Oh, they've gone through the space war.
Oh, yeah, and the star was dying and stuff.
Yeah.
And they found a way to Scorpio to find the Astraeus of the future.
Someone's paying attention anyway, so that's good. Right. The sunfire flew in a great arc towards Scorpio, weaving between all the battles of the war zone. Lucky's route often brought them close to danger, and Axe's Skyhawks tried to intercept them more than once, but by the time they'd registered the sunfire, the ship was already gone. And a whirling, curling course their navigators just couldn't follow. All the way to Scorpio, Professor Byzantine kept Lucky hard at work with the astrolabe, and even harder practicing with his power. "The space wall is a formidable test of your control," said the professor, "and you passed with flying colours. So, your task now is to go beyond mere control. You must start learning how to use your power, how to tap into it, let it loose, push it further and further, as far as it can go." At first, Lucky was reluctant. He didn't want to let the light shine out of him or flare into flame, but he was coming to trust the professor's judgment, and he was encouraged by his progress with the astrolabe. So he began to experiment in small ways. He started cautiously, learning how to channel the power through his hands, so he didn't burn his clothes every time he used it. He learned how to project the light away from himself, illuminating the air around him. Gradually, he built up courage and confidence to let the fire out too, allowing blazing heat to steam from his body, even creating explosions by a force of will. It felt different, making these things happen deliberately, rather than having them happen to him in his dreams or bursting out of him because of his fear, as they had before. The professor and Bazooka were with him throughout, urging him on as he made the cabin light up with vivid colours. But it never became easy for him. It never stopped hurting. Sometimes he lost control. He'd be overwhelmed by fire and he would feel like his head was splitting open under the strain, exploding, burning so badly he never wanted to do it again. Even when it went well, he always felt so raw and exhausted afterwards that it was a relief to practice astral martial arts with Bixer instead. At least the worst that could happen there was getting beaten up. So the time passed by as they travelled through Axa space, surging past great rings of astral dust, chasing the comets' tails across the stars until at last they saw the Scorpio system ahead, glowing purple and black, and at its heart the planet Scorpio 6, home to the Star Talker of the future. The sunfire landed without incident. There was no government ships patrolling the skies, no sign of the Axa army either. It was Professor Byzantine, as Professor Byzantine had said, a neutral world. Everyone was invited to the main cabin to celebrate their arrival and finalise their plans. Lucky and Bixer came in from training to find Mystica and the Professor in deep conversation over a pot of Zocco that was bubbling on the stove. "Exceeding all expectations," the Professor was saying. "In fact, sometimes I find myself wondering maybe—" "Lucky," said Mystica sharply. "Bixer, welcome." The Professor looked up, startled. Before Lucky could ask what they'd been talking about, Bazooka attacked his cloven hoof boots while Frolics and the captain came striding down from the cockpit. Everyone seemed excited at the thought of what lay ahead. Mystica began to pour the steaming Zocco out into cups, but as she did so, flash! Another terrible pulse of light came through the vid screens. Mystica dropped the Zocco pot. It fell to the floor and smashed to pieces, hot liquid splattering everywhere as she screamed in pain. Lucky helplessly watched her coughing, shaking, worse than ever before, and still the searing light blazed on. Everything was laid bare in its merciless glare, and he could see every drop of Zocco on the floor, every line and wrinkle on Mystica's face, until at last the light faded. He hurried to pick up the pieces of broken pot as Captain Knox moved to help Mystica. "Don't worry about that, boy," the captain told him. Go now with the others and see if you can find anything that might help us." Grimly, Lucky pulled on his space traveller's coat and tucked the astrolabe into his pocket. Frolics, Bixer and Professor Byzantine made preparations beside him. They were coming too, while Mystica and the captain stayed on the ship. But Bazooka the Phoenix seemed terrified at the idea of going out. She flapped her wings in horror and hid under the table, squawking loudly, "Bah! Bah! Bah!" "Bazooka," the Professor called, "come out of there. You have nothing to fear." But still she wouldn't come. "Bazaki?" she asked. "No, absolutely not. You must come with me, this instant." Reluctantly, she crept out from under the table, eyes cloudy with fear. She perched uncertainly on the Professor's shoulder, shaking her head with it and chittering to herself. "What's wrong with her?" asked Lucky, stomach tight with tension. "Pay her no heed," said the Professor. "Come now, time is of the essence." They said quick, tense farewells to Mystica and Knox, and then Frolics drove them out on the cycle. Lucky's spirits lifted as soon as he saw Scorpio 6. It was beautiful. Lush green fields and rolling hills under an open lilac sky. The air was heady with the scent of freshly tilled soil, of agriculture and animals, things growing and alive. He had never seen such things in the human world, and he drank it all in thirstily, relishing the new sights and sounds and smells. In the far distance, across the horizon, an enormous rainbow framed the sky. Professor Byzantine's face lit with a smile when he saw it. "Take us that way, Frolics," he said. "That's where we'll find her." Frolics drove them through fields of wild flowers, their colours as vibrant as their scents. Sunflower golds, passion flower purples, poppy field reds. They drove through forests full of trees, dotted with dwelling huts that were decorated with patterns representing the stars and constellations. "Keep going," said the Professor, as the sun set and twilight fell, turning the deep sky indigo. He pointed at the horizon again. Lucky looked up and blinked in surprise. The rainbow they'd seen earlier seemed much bigger from here, and it had become so bright it was lighting up the twilight with vivid colours. He'd never seen a rainbow after sunset before. He didn't think such a thing was possible. He kept watching, puzzled and enchanted by its colours, though no one else seemed surprised. "There's never been any fighting on Scorpio then, Frolics was saying. Never even a case of the living death." "Indeed," said the Professor. "You will never see Theobroma's army here. They hate Scorpio. They call it the traitor's paradise, because the Star Talker of the future refused to join the war. But this is how it was everywhere before the war. It may be hard to remember after all that has happened, but back then we had such hopes for the meeting of humans and Axa." He sighed. "You know, they say even Theobroma had her human lover once, although I find that had a human lover once, although I find it hard to believe. King Theobroma, snorted Felix. There's no way. He was the one who said the stars wanted us to make war on the humans. Couldn't the Star Talkers have challenged that? Asked Lucky. Couldn't you have said it wasn't true? Oh, we tried, said the professor. But how'd you prove a thing like that? The king and his commanders had whipped the Axer up into such a frenzy, they wouldn't listen to us. Our temples were destroyed by our own people. We had no choice but to flee and to go into hiding. Few of us ever recovered from those events, and we are diminished by the war. Only the Star Talker of the future was strong enough to persuade her planet to stay out of it, and you can see what a wise decision that was. They came over the top of the hill as twilight deepened into night. Right in front of them now was the rainbow, and here, at last, Lucky could see that it was really some kind of vast crystalline structure, a perfect circular wheel glowing from inside with every colour of the spectrum, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. It was bigger than any building he'd ever seen, reaching right up into the clouds, and it took his breath away. As he looked closer, he realised with a thrill that there were compartments hanging off this wheel, each one full of people. They were looking down at the ground from on high as the wheel turned slowly in the Scorpio night. That, my boy, is an Axer temple, said Professor Byzantine. The Rainbow Temple Wheel of Scorpio, and that is where we will find the Star Talker of the future. Lucky kept looking up and up and up. He couldn't take his eyes off it. It was the most amazing construction, constantly turning through its cycles, majestic as the sky itself. They walked right up to it. Many people were clustered around its base, camped out in tents. Old folk, parents, children, all together. There were even some humans there, mixing peacefully with the Axer. All around them, Lucky could see the gleam of campfires, and he could smell the warm wood smoke on the wind. Frolics gazed up at the wheel in an undisguised awe. For once, he made no jokes. He was like a little boy in the presence of something he never quite dared believe in. Oh, it's amazing, he said, his eyes reflecting the rainbow lights. Bixer bit a fingernail and held back for a moment, gazing up at the wheel. What are we waiting for? It's just, you can't imagine what this Star Talker means to us, said Bixer. Growing up in the human world, all we'd ever heard was how everything Axer was rubbish. But she was different. They played her music and they loved it. And the idea that an Axer could do that, make music so good and strong and brilliant that even humans had to respect it. She shook her head, lost for words. Lucky stared at her. Who is the Star Talker of the future, anyway? Gala, of course, said Professor Byzantine. She is not merely a singer. She is a Star Talker, the most powerful of all. Lucky gulped. The woman who made the scariest music he'd ever heard was the Star Talker of the future. Well, come on then, he said, trying to put on a brave face of it. Let's see if we can't get her autograph. There was only one entrance to the wheel, a high gate guarded by a burly Axer armed with cudgels. Professor Byzantine approached them, holding himself straight and proud. From the stars we all come, he greeted them. What do you want? Snapped the guard, who seemed to be their chief. Why, we are here to see Gala, naturally, said Professor Byzantine. The guard's face darkened. And who are you? Said the chief. Have you been granted an audience with the Star Talker? We are old friends, said the professor, stroking his whiskers. We have travelled very far. She will certainly wish to see us. The chief shook his head. The atmosphere had changed. All sense of wonder was gone now, and the night air crackled with tension. We defend our Star Talker with our lives, said the chief, horns glinting. Others have come before you, wanting to hurt her. None of them have left this world alive. The guards circled Lucky and his friends. Frolics grinned and held his hands up in a gesture of peace. "Hey, you want to defend a Star Talker?" he said amiably. "Then you should know you're talking to Professor Byzantine, Star Talker of the past." They all stared at this little old man with the white whiskers and the chittering bird on his shoulder. They didn't look remotely convinced. "The Star Talker of the past left our worlds long ago," said the chief. "I don't know what he looks like anymore. I just see an old man who's causing trouble. Get out of here if you know what's good for you." Bix's needles flashed crimson. "We're not going anywhere," she said. "We need to talk to Gala, and we're not leaving until we do." "By all the 12 Astraeus," said the chief, digging his hooves into the ground, "get out of here, or we'll throw you out, little girl." "Little girl?" said Bixa. "You moon brain, you have no idea how important this is." "Who you calling a moon brain?" The chief's face twisted up with disbelief and indignation. His horns bristled at Bixa. Bixa's needles bristled right back. Raw aggression sizzled in the space between them. The space rapidly narrowed as they moved forward towards each other. The chief towered over her, but Bixa stood her ground, shaping into an astral martial arts style that Lucky recognised as Cancer the Crab. The chief swung a fist at her, but she'd already taken a deft sideways step away. She flicked out her hooves like a crab with its pincers and trapped the chief's arm in her grip. With one twist, she flipped him over. He hit the ground hard, sprawling flat on his backside in the dust, with one of her hooves poised menacingly above his face. But the other guards were circling them now, swinging their cudgels. Lucky didn't know what to do. He didn't doubt that Bixa could deal with them, but this was getting out of hand, and it wasn't going to get them in. Professor Byzantine raised an eyebrow. "Lucky," he said softly, "I think our friends need a little convincing. Perhaps they could see some of the things that you've been practicing." Lucky concentrated. He shut his eyes and thought about everything he'd been working on with the professor. He dug deep inside himself and felt it rise up within him. Heat, light, incandescent power. He could taste burning on the back of his throat as the energy rose and swelled and grew, and then he let it loose. He let the power stream out of his hands and sent it straight up into the sky as a volley of multicoloured fireworks. They exploded above, sending flares streaking out across the night. And all around the wheel, people gazed up at Lucky's fireworks, savouring their bright colours and their smoky smells. The guards looked up too, and when they looked down, there was a new expression on their faces. They stared in awe at the glow of his hands as he pulled the power back inside him. "Can it be?" whispered one of them as Lucky fell forward into the professor's arms, exhausted and in pain as always. "What say you, friends?" the professor asked them. "May we see my old comrade Gala now?" After a moment's silence, the chief nodded. Bixa moved her hoof away from his face and offered him a hand up. "Who are you people?" he asked. "They're like something from the legends," one of the others said. "It's like a sign that the 12 are returning." The professor's eyes sparkled. "Quite so," he said. "That is what we believe, and I am glad to hear you say it. It is precisely what I had hoped to find in your hearts." Frolics gaped at the professor, open-mouthed. So did the guards. They glanced at Lucky again, but not one of them could say a thing to him. They turned back to the professor with a strange look in their eyes, as if they'd just discovered their dearest, most secret dreams weren't just dreams, but they were real after all. "So you really are the Star Talker of the past," they said. Professor bowed graciously before them. The atmosphere changed again. The guards now clustered respectfully around him as if they were celebrities or royalties. "Oh, how we have missed you, sir," said the chief. "You don't know how much we've missed you. We've had such troubles with this war. The one thing that keeps us going is our hope that the Astraeus will return. It's a hope we've never lost, but every year it gets harder to believe. Will they really come back? Sir, will it be soon?" "We certainly hope so," said the professor. and we hope Gala will help us find them. Then please step on board the Rainbow Temple wheel. Step right this way." And with that, he opened the gate with a flourish and moved aside to let them through. Well, yeah. Well, I'll read it, whether you'll get to listen to it. Right. Hope you enjoyed that. See you next time.